This week we have a special guest. It's Debbie from RecoveryWerks. It is a nonprofit in New Braunfels that she started that is right along the lines of everything that we do in recovery. And so, Debbie, come on up. Gotta give me a little hug. I'm a hugger.
Oh, I'm a hugger too.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you. So I always tell everybody a little bit of backstory. I've known Debbie 10 years, probably?
Yeah, probably.
About 10 years, and side note, I've only been sober 7. So she knew me before sobriety, and so she's been able to, inform me, I guess, of some of the things. But I just say that because nowhere in our recovery walk do we know what's going to happen, and people that have been in our lives when we are not sober yet are the very same people that will forgive you for your actions and accept you for who you are when you're in recovery. So Debbie, tell us about yourself.
Okay. So first of all, I want to say that I was not the sole person that helped start RecoveryWerks. There were 2 of us.
Okay.
We're co-founders of the organization. Joanne Dash, who is a licensed chemical dependency counselor, and me. And so my background is Air Force, retired Air Force for 23 years. And so that experience, being in personnel, administrative kind of work, was what I used to help start RecoveryWerks. And then Joanne brought in the program, which was as a licensed chemical dependency counselor. So the two, those 2 skill sets worked really well together. Plus the fact that we were both family members. We had loved ones who struggled with substance use disorder. So we brought that program to New Braunfels because they didn't have a program like that.
Okay, so you're more along the lines of Al-Anon, Nar-Anon kind of thing, as far as like being a family member?
Personally, yes.
Personally.
I come from that Al-Anon side of
Okay.
things. But our program at RecoveryWerks serves teens and young adults who struggle with substance use disorder. We have staff who are all professionally licensed, whether they're LCDCs or peer recovery coaches, all have lived experience. They walk alongside the teens and young adults who struggle with substance use disorder. And then Joanne and I are on the family side with the loved ones, whether they're siblings or children of, starting at age 9 up to 18. We have a special group for them. And then we have the family group, which is for 18 and over, whether you're an aunt, uncle, parent, grandparent, caregiver, sibling, an older sibling. So we have all those support communities going on at the same time.
Quick question comes to mind.
Okay.
So let's just say me, I'm in recovery, so I'm a suffering addict alcoholic in recovery. And so if I was, say, at RecoveryWerks and I was younger and I had a father that was an alcoholic, which I did, but he's gone now, but and I had a father that was an alcoholic, would I be welcomed at your family group because of or would I have to stay in there? I mean, can people that are actually in recovery come to the family group because they have other family members that are suffering? Can they kind of do both things at once?
Absolutely. We have people in our family group who are also in long-term recovery from substance use disorder.
Okay.
Because quite honestly, codependency, which is the family disease, a lot of people that struggle with substance use disorder also find they have codependency.
Of course.
So we have those double winners in our group.
And the addict alcoholic loves to create codependence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So okay, cool. Okay, another thing that comes to mind, I know that you're in New Braunfels,
Yes.
which is a little bit outside of San Antonio, about 20 miles north of San Antonio, I believe, something like that. So have you noticed an influx of opiate addiction as far as like the fentanyl, the Oxycontins, things like that? Is that increased, or is that a big deal there, or what does it look like your population would be addicted?
So it's really more of something that the program staff would be into. I know that there's a smattering of everything. THC is probably still the thing that we see the most of because our focus is on the teen group. But we also, people come in with all kinds of things, and we don't really differentiate. If you've got a substance use disorder,
It's a substance
use disorder.
Right.
So our program is alternative peer group. That's the model of recovery. When somebody comes in to join our program, we don't sit them down and give them an assessment to determine how addicted you are or what your drug of choice is. That doesn't really matter to us. If you want to get recovery, then you can come and we'll walk alongside you on that journey. So it's really the primary premise of alternative peer group recovery is to build a healthy support network of peers. We find that that's really important for our teenagers because social support is what they crave. And so what you use or how often you use it isn't really what we're driving at. It's how can we support you not using mind-changing chemicals? What do you need? How can we walk alongside you? What's driving you into that different group of folks who aren't supportive of your recovery? And then it's teaching kids how to have fun and without using drugs and alcohol.
Cool.
A lot of them come to us, I've heard them talking and they'll say things like, I didn't know I could have this much fun without using drugs.
Funny little backstory since you said that. When I went into treatment, it occurred to me that I was changing when we were going to meditation in the morning. It was about 6 a.m, and somebody had a Bluetooth playing, and they were playing that song, Funky White Boy, and I was dancing, and I don't dance,
right?
And I just don't. And I was sober, and I was dancing, and I was smiling, and I was happy. I was like, oh my God, what is this? Wow, here I am. And so I get that. And so it's the community is important. You have to have community. I don't believe that, there are people that can do this alone, I suppose. I haven't really met those people because I guess they're alone. But anyway, but the thing is that I think community is super important.
Right.
And without it, I think that we would, we're human beings.
Right.
We are designed for community. And we surround ourselves with the right community, the right things happen.
Right.
So another quick question about the teens. So question, you have resources if an adult comes to you and say, hey, this is where you can go to do this, right?
And we do. And so when I said that we have a teen group and a young adult group, our young adult group is, it doesn't stop at a certain age point. So if somebody comes to us and they're 65 and they have a young person's heart and they want to participate in our young adult group, they're welcome.
So a guy like me that's about to be 21, I could go.
You absolutely could. And what would happen is we would invite you to come to the adult group, the young adult group, and you would determine personally whether that is a good fit for you.
Okay.
Because our focus again is on going out and doing sober social activities, the one-on-one counseling, the support group meetings, and you would know if you fit in that group. And if you didn't, and it was like, this isn't really for me, they're all too juvenile.
Okay.
We would help you find the resources that would work for you.
Cool. Okay. Another one. So I know that in my work, okay, I work with a lot of justice-involved individuals that need recovery, and I also work with just people from the community that need recovery. But the one thing that I have noticed over the years is the high instance of mental health. So I know that young teens, they're not that old yet, but I know that my mental health problems, I went through a lot of physical, sexual, mental abuse throughout my whole childhood, right? And so I had these problems when I was young. So do you see that a lot of the youth that you run into that have these problems have some kind of something going on mentally?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
And we have collaborations with other nonprofits and agencies in our community that provide specialized mental health services. And so we have an active referral service between River City Advocacy, Counseling Center, and MHDP, which is our mental health authority in New Braunfels. So we refer back and forth a lot. A lot of the therapists in our area, they know about us, and when they see that recovery is something that might be needed, they'll shoot them our way. That's really important. So one of the things that we think is important in that mental health recovery space is that it's really hard for mental health personnel to treat the mental health disorders outside of substance use if somebody's still using. So what we encourage is that you get that recovery going first, so that the mental health providers that outside of recovery can really treat, what is that? Is that depression? Is it anxiety? Is it bipolar? You know, let's clear the slate with the drugs and alcohol, and then address the mental health disorder. And I'll say from a family perspective, I prayed that my child that it was mental health and not addiction. That was so much more acceptable to have a mental health disorder for me than it was to have a substance use disorder. And I fought that. I would take her to mental health providers and try to get the right medicine for the anxiety or the right medicine for the depression. But when in reality, what we really needed was recovery. And now she doesn't take any of those medications.
She's doing well. I do follow her a little bit. I kind of keep my eye out. Yeah, so for me, total opposite, okay? I had absolutely no problem admitting I was an addict alcoholic. I mean, you know some of my backstory, so I didn't have a problem with that. But when I was asked if I had mental health issues, I'm like, no, I'm a grown ass man. I'm fine. And that's what the guy that was talking to me about, a friend of my daughter's, was talking to me, Caleb Black. He said, yeah, he laughed. He said, well, I beg to differ. And I said, well, and he said, well, your daughter told me you tried to commit suicide a while back, and you don't think that might be a little mental? And I'm like, no, I knew exactly what I was doing. And he laughed. He said, well, if you knew exactly what you did, you wouldn't be here. Okay, so I kind of laughed at that. Well, what that did was that opened the door for me to be evaluated. And of course, I went to treatment, and you go through that period, that early period where you're getting off of the substances and such, which I had been incarcerated for a slight time before that. So it wasn't that hard for me to stay. Well, yeah, I had to go to inpatient treatment. If I hadn't gone to inpatient treatment, I told them I'll keep getting high till you catch me, and then I'll go to inpatient treatment. So I made the smart choice of saying, I know me, and my ability is not to stay sober. I have to have an environment that's going to protect me while I guess the best way I can think of wording it, they loved me until I could love myself. Yeah. And so I believe that mental health and recovery are something that if you do one, like you were saying about your daughter, you do one and you don't do the other, then the other's going to lead back to the one.
Right.
Anyway, it's going to go either way, right? You have to kind of do them together, and life can get so good. And one of the things I do, the reason I mentioned my abuse as my child, and I do it all the time, is because I want men to know it's a safe thing to talk about, because men, we don't talk about those things. We don't, we're not wired that way. We're wired to be strong. And I know that, so here comes another question. So in your dealings with people, mainly males, young males, do you see that already developing in them, that they have that, I'm stronger than the mental health thing, or stronger than this, that they have that attitude that they're not supposed to need help?
Well, so I can speak from the family perspective.
Okay.
I do see that it is more difficult oftentimes for men to open up. And so what we do as often as we can is we'll split our family group, men's and women's. And so when the men are together and the women aren't with them, the spouse, or if it's, sometimes men will just come by themselves, they do seem to have a much better conversation when it's men to men.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm not in that group, but that's what I hear, that they really enjoy that. And I know that for the teens and the young adults, when they can, they split them up too, because just getting them away from or in their own group really creates conversation, more open conversation.
Yeah, I had some experiences with that with the PDAP when they were, they had their groups, and I think that's where Rosemary met you.
Right.
Because I went to PDAP to get my kids sober before I was sober.
Right.
I didn't tell anybody I wasn't sober, but
right.
I remember that men were more vulnerable in that group, but at that time I was unable to be vulnerable in any way. And I used to not be able to tell anybody about some of the things, like for instance, when the planes hit the towers on 9/11.
Yeah.
I was in a seedy-ass motel in southern Alabama with a crack pipe to my mouth at that moment. And it was like, I used to not be able to tell anybody because I was so ashamed. The shame wasn't during my addiction, it was after my addiction.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about me smoking the crack at the time. It was about me not having any emotional attachment. It wasn't until after I got sober and I started watching something, and I'm like, oh my God. You know, it's weird that we turn off all emotions when we're in our addiction or in our alcoholism, but we have to turn them off. Got to. Or you can't be an active addict alcoholic if you live in this emotional world. You know, you gotta disconnect. But I'm happy to be where I am today. So more along the lines of your experiences, okay? In the military, because I do a podcast with veterans, and since you're a veteran, I do thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I'm also a veteran. I used to not claim to be, but I am. My wife is too. And so when you were in the military, you were in personnel, so did you experience a high volume of people that struggled with alcohol, mainly alcohol in the military, I'm sure, but of drugs also? Did you see any of that while you were in the service?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Kicked a few people out for it too.
Yeah.
Which,
I wasn't the one, but you were.
I mean, unfortunately, there was a program, you know, that people could participate in, but drinking was, when I was in, was pretty much the thing you did.
Yep.
Everybody, we drove drunk. Yeah, I will say I have used alcohol. I never crossed the line of alcoholism, but I also stopped drinking when I got into recovery for codependency. So I'm just feeling like, well, maybe I just didn't get there, and I would have if I had kept going. So yeah, we all drank in the military. That was kind of the expectation.
Right, but not as much as I did.
Maybe not.
Because that's where my difficulty lied when I was in the military, was the fact that I had mental illness that I didn't even know about, and massive alcohol, and I didn't care. I mean, they weren't gonna stop me. They tried, but and so I ended up getting kicked out, which is fine. Life does what life does. It leads us where it wants us to, where God leads us where we're supposed to go, and God puts us through every single day of our life to take us to where we are at that moment. And I truly believe that. So I don't regret any of my past, because without it, I couldn't connect with people the way that I do. And so I'm glad you quit drinking.
Me too.
Because I had a fellow by the name of Rick Green in one of my earlier podcasts, and he's super smart about the science of addiction and everything. And one thing he said was, you may not have that genetic gene that makes you in that category that you can become an addict. No, you can actually form that gene. The DNA can change. He said you can actually create that gene, and it might not show up in your child, but it'll show up in your grandchild.
Yep.
And I'm like, So my question was, okay, if you can create it, can you make it go away? And I don't think they've gotten that far yet. But would it be? And I believe down the road, I believe that science and technology will find a way to correct, maybe it's some sort of way, that gene, but I do not believe that science or technology will ever come up with a way to cure alcoholism or addiction. Because, I think that is an issue that I don't, I believe in medically assisted treatment. I know that it works. But the thing is that there's just more to it than just genetics or, hey, take this pill and you'll be fine. I know for alcoholics, take this pill and it'll make you throw up every time you drink, but you drink enough and get past the throw up, you're okay. So it's, and everybody that's an alcoholic that's on it knows that.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Where there's a will, there's a way. And so do y'all provide free Narcan to the community?
We have in the past. So Sakata has come out and done some community classes for us. We've hosted them, and they bring Narcan and distribute it to those who are in the area. So we get it through them, or other treatment centers that are getting the influx of Narcan to give away. We have our own stash that we keep, but we don't. So
I have a stash too if you need some.
Thanks.
I have.
Everybody should have that in their emergency.
Well, so people have told me they'll get in my car and they'll see it in my car and they'll be, well, what do you carry that around? Are you expecting? And I'm not expecting, but if I ever need it, I want to have it, because I don't want to look back and say, damn, I wish I had it.
Right.
Because I have it in my car. I have two of them in my car. I have it at work, I have it at home, I have like 2 of them at my house in different places, and everybody that comes to my house or everybody that's around me knows this. That way, if we ever run into that situation, because you never know when you're gonna be driving down the road and you see somebody
And the great thing is, it doesn't hurt if it's not what it is.
Right.
It doesn't do any bad.
Exactly, yeah, so that's cool. Okay, well, so, all right, next question, okay? How many members of your family are there?
My immediate family, I have 2 kids.
I thought so. Have both of them struggled?
No.
No, just one?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so it's not a whole generational thing for you?
Well,
It could be, but I mean, yeah.
it wasn't until we started going through this when my daughter was a teenager that I found out that my dad had alcoholism. He hid it really well and nobody knew. And my mother one day said, she told him that he needed to divulge that to me. So we went for a walk and he shared that he had gotten a couple DUIs and was going to 12-step meetings. And I was blown away. I had no idea. So I do believe it's in the family. And then, more discussion, his mother, I guess, was just very careful because she knew she could overindulge. And so I think there is definitely a genetic.
I believe so. So my father was an alcoholic, and I do not believe that my grandmother and grandfather were alcoholics or addicts, and I don't believe my uncles are. So really, I guess he's the one in the family on that side. But now my mother, she never admitted to being an addict, but as I think back on it, she never went without prescription medication.
Mm.
Of course, having my dad the way that he was, I could understand somebody needs some prescription medication to deal with that. But even after they weren't together anymore, that continued. And I didn't know. But now looking back, I can say, I think my mother was a prescription drug addict. My grandfather on my mother's side, on both, my grandfather, my grandmother, and his father, I know were all alcoholics, raving alcoholics. So I know it was heavy in my family. And so I warned my family that, hey, you don't want to drink. It's a problem. And really, because that's definitely where we get this little thing that switches, right?
Yeah. And that's so hard in society because
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
I think alcohol is the most dangerous drug in America, even though fentanyl kills more people.
I agree with you.
But I think in the long run, if you look back on it, I believe alcohol probably kills more, if not, over the time. And hopefully we'll get a handle on this fentanyl thing and get it. I don't think we'll ever shut it down completely, but maybe with you, me, and other people in recovery and just society as a whole, I think that we're becoming more able to love the addict, love the alcoholic, till they can love themselves, rather than say, hey, because honestly, I used to be an asshole about those things because my first real addiction to a heavy drug was crank. Although I started drinking very young, my dad made whiskey, so at 9 I'm sipping in his whiskey. But I don't know, somewhere around 14, 15 is when crank kicked in. And when that got out of control and people were pressuring me to quit doing that, well, I quit doing that in one day, right? But that's the day that I started doing cocaine. Mm. But I'm not an addict because I quit that in a day, right? And so fast forward a little bit, that got out of control, so I had to quit that. Well, I quit it in a day. Went right back to the heavy whiskey, mushrooms, weed, just that kind of thing for a while until that got out of control. Guess what? I quit drinking in a day, but I went right back to cocaine. And so in my mind, I'm thinking I'm not an addict alcoholic because I can quit these things in a day. So I was that guy that would walk up to people and say, hey, I quit in a day, why can't you? And I'd be high or drunk at the time, yeah. And I never realized until now, looking back, man, that was difficult. I'm sure for the person I was talking to, it had to be hard because I can't stand people that do that now because I've learned the only way that we can spread this program is through love. Yeah. Love and through our love, that leads them to what everybody refers to as a higher power, which I choose to call God. People can call it whatever they want to call it because I think that, do I know what God looks like? No, I do not. Do I know anything that goes beyond when I'm down? And I don't know. I do know it's a better place, and I have my beliefs that tell me that I'm going to be in a better place. Right. But I can't tell you what it is. And just like anybody else that has whatever they can. So I think that I think everybody that has a certain amount of spirituality is talking about the same thing. Initially, we call it what we want, right? And then when it comes to religion, I'm not anti-religion, okay? I'm not that at all, but I do firmly believe that all religions got something right. All religions got something wrong. There's not a religion out there that's got it all right, because I'm big on that, and I'm big on lack of judgment. I think that my walk with my higher power tells me that I am not to judge anybody. That's not my job. My job is to walk with them, like you said. And so, how do you feel about all that? Tell me about that.
I agree with that. I have, I'll say that before I got into recovery, I had a perception of God as somebody that I would just like give my list of what I wanted to accomplish today, or what I needed him to do for me. And the 12 steps and the recovery process has completely changed my relationship with God. Before recovery, I didn't have a relationship. I didn't know what that meant. So I've really moved from religious to spiritual. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing.
It is. I can agree with that.
Yeah, I try really hard every day to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. Don't do it perfectly all the time, He's just so forgiving.
The third step prayer is my foundation. That is my cornerstone of everything, and I do that every day. If I forget to do it in the morning by 10 a.m., I know I forgot. I'm like, oh man,
You sure do.
this is fixing to be train wreck, and so I got to backtrack. But the thing is, I can backtrack.
Yeah, I know.
I don't like say, oh well, the day's wasted. I immediately go back and do that. Funny thing, when I first started working the steps, I had a problem with step 2, which is so simple, right? Came to believe that a power greater than themselves could restore us to sanity. You could read that in a meeting, and I never heard the word could. I heard the word would. And when I read it, I read the word would. I never read could. It was weird, and it's written right there, and you're looking at it, but I guess my brain's kind of weird some ways. But and I couldn't get past step 2. And finally somebody was like, well, read that again. And I read it again. No. It doesn't say would, it says could.
Wow.
And I said, well, I know that he could, but he won't. He never has. I've asked him a million times. He hasn't, so he's not going to, so he wouldn't. And they're like, well,
but he could.
But he could. And I said, yeah, he could. So I made it past second step right there. If I'm stuck for 2 months and then just one conversation. That's funny how recovery works that way. Because I truly believed that I was beyond redemption. When they talk about that unfortunate one, that's me. That was me. I was the guy that this was not going to work. And I think everybody feels that way when they first get it. Like everybody thinks, oh, yeah, I'm not going to, this isn't going to work for me. And so recovery didn't work for me, God did.
Yeah.
I think.
The 12 steps to me, it's that path that brings you to a relationship with God where He is able to do His will in us. And, so when I came into recovery, I remember sitting in the group, listening to the 12 steps and the 12 promises be read. And for the first couple of months, I didn't share at all. I didn't think I needed to be there because my kid needed to be there. And it wasn't about me, it was about her. And if they could just fix her, I'd be okay. But I would sit in that meeting and I would listen to the steps and the promises. We'd get to the promise of we will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. And it would always make me tear. And then I would sit and listen to these people talking, and I would just cry. All these family members who were talking about their loved ones, it broke my heart, and their story was my story. But that we will not regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. I felt so much guilt that I had caused this in my kid, so much shame that I wasn't a better parent. And if I had only done things differently, the life wouldn't be like this today. And so when the promises started to come true, and that not regretting the past became reality. And it was like more gratitude for having experienced what I did so that I could be where I am today. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I have goosebumps. It's amazing.
Of course, that's what God does.
That's what recovery is.
It's funny because I never say I never say no. You know, I've had people in my life that have you know, coworkers or such that, well, this guy's been here 5 times, he's not ever going to get it. You know, why are you talking to him? And I'm like, well, I never say no, because you never know which time. And it's funny because sometimes those same people are some of my best success stories, because it just takes what it takes.
Right.
I don't believe in relapse. I don't believe relapse is a thing. And I'll tell people, they get mad at me. They're like, oh yeah, well, you know, because relapse just means you never quit, in my opinion. Okay. Because you have people that come in and they say, well, I'm a chronic relapser. And I immediately key to that. I'm like, no, you are not a chronic relapser, because when you tell yourself you're a chronic relapser, you just gave yourself permission to relapse. So I try to switch that perspective to tell them, hey, you never relapse, you just never quit. But I love recovery, and yes, I can agree with everything you've said. And I want to thank you for being you. You do play a big part in my recovery journey. I think watching you and a few other people that were in my wife's life helped me to be able to accept my situation. You know, I remember Ray was my wife's sponsor, and I didn't know what a 12-step call was. And so I guess my wife had her sponsor, because she got sober long before I did. My wife had her sponsor come to the house and have a dinner with us, and she was really important that I be there. And I'm like, okay, oh yeah, I guess so. You know, I'm sure I was drinking at the time, and they sat down and they were telling me about this program that they were in, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know, I'm not gonna eat the pill. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be in no cult, because that's kind of how I thought. That's how most people think. And I literally looked at both of them and I said, Ray, I don't need your program. I got Todd's program. I'm good, right? And me and her laughed like crazy every time I talked to her about that, because after I got sober, the first time I talked to her, she said, how's your program? I was like, oh no, I don't work Todd's program. Oh no, I work your program now. Because yeah, it's funny how that works. Well, listen, so I think that it's great what you're doing in Brussels, and I really applaud you for that. It sounds like you're doing a lot of good work, and I probably stumped you on a couple of my questions, but I wanted to know the answers.
Yeah.
And so, in closing, do you have anything that you would like to share with people about you, RecoveryWerks, or?
So I would say RecoveryWerks is a program that does not charge. So we would welcome anybody. We have a firm belief that recovery should be available to everyone. So financial barriers are not a problem there. We would suggest newcomers are always welcome. You don't have to sign up. You don't have to call in. You don't have to do any of that. You just show up to a meeting. We tell you all about the services that we offer. You can also find all that information on our website, which is RecoveryWerks, all one word, WERKS.org.
I was going to synthesize that, yes.
.org. And you can see all of our meeting schedules and stuff like that. And I'm grateful to be here and to be a part of this.
I'm glad that you came. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And I have not been to RecoveryWerks, but I need to come up there and check it out. I've been telling myself that for a while, so I will definitely make my way up there and join y'all for maybe a group sometime. And bring the wife, and we'll do that. Well,
that'd be cool.
Thank you so much for coming.
All right, thanks,
You
Todd.
have a great day.
You too.
Okay, everybody, that was this week's podcast. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to let you know that over the next probably week and a half to 2 week period, I'm going to be doing a series on the 12 steps. I'm going to break down each step in a short little breakdown. It won't be a long podcast, probably 3 to 5 minutes each on each step. I've written it out. It's been taking me a little while, so I'm going to start recording that and posting that next week. And stay tuned for next week's podcast at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.